can't fix the problem for you, I'm just telling you that. So Plato talks about three kinds of pleasure. There's the pleasure of the mind, which is the intellect. There's the pleasure of aesthetics, which is beauty. And there's the pleasure of physicality, sensuality. So these are very much ordered. It's a hierarchy. There's nothing wrong with sensual pleasure, but it's a lower form. So of the soul, he says the soul is divided into three parts: reason, spirit, which is what in due course becomes virtues, really, and appetite, which is the gut, you know, the need to want to eat, all those appetites. Plato also is famous for his book, The Republic. And actually, if you're taking the political philosophy seriously, it's still worth reading Plato's Republic. The first time I read Plato's Republic, I had to speak at a citizenship ceremony not long afterwards. And because I just read The Republic, I found it very moving. You know, I don't think Australians think much about citizenship and what it means and the privileges of citizenship. But it would do us a power of good to read Plato's Republic and see how important it is for us to belong to one another in this association with citizens, relationships with citizens. Now, you may not understand what I'm talking about because in recent days we've shifted from being a society to being an economy. And we used to be citizens, but we're consumers now. And that kind of shift will become very, very obvious to us when we start getting into the Enlightenment, because we start to reduce truth down to an individual. And you know, all those shifts will become very obvious. So in his Republic, he divides citizens into three classes: peasants, they're people who haven't got time to think. All these philosophers agree that the beginning of wisdom is wonder. You start philosophy from a place of wonder. And if you have no wonder, you are no longer a philosopher. That picks up over and again, you know. I probably shouldn't divert, but it's in Hebrew tradition. That statement, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, is more or less the same thing. It's this sense of wonder and awe. In one of the clumsiest words out of the Bible, translated into English, and English is a terrific language, but one of the clumsiest words is the word sin, because that one word translates about 13 or 14 different concepts. And the Apostle Paul's favourite word for the word sin is to lack awe. Asabion, no awe. So what sin means for him, especially in the book of Romans, is you've forgotten to be in awe. It's the same concept as wonder. So God knows where I was going with that. Oh yeah, peasants. So he says you can't do philosophy unless you have a sense of wonder and you have time. And peasants don't have time. So you need a certain amount of money to do philosophy. Yeah. So the middle class is very big on courage, actually. So soldiers and craftsmen and that sort of thing. And for him, the highest form in society are the philosophers and the kings. And in his ideal society, a philosopher should be a king. He felt that democracy was a degeneration. Interesting, because it's Greek. So he says that a king can become a tyrant and a democracy can become chaos. So his idea was something called polity, but we'll worry about that in a minute. They tried to kill him as well, you know, but because they killed his teacher, and he drank the hemlock. And Socrates, actually you should read the Apology, because the speech that Socrates makes at his death is still moving. It's very moving. Anyway, so they wanted to kill him as well, but he decided the world would be robbed of a valuable resource if he drank hemlock. Excuse the coughing. I'm trying to minimise it. Aristotle. He was, for 20 years, a student of Plato. Plato went into exile when they wanted to kill him. He went into exile, and he went around the Mediterranean teaching, and eventually he came back, and he came to a town called Aquinas, where he set up a school, and that's where we get the academy from. I'm good at giving stuff that nobody's interested in. In the first time the Persians cracked the Greeks and got a belting for it, when there was, that was in a town called Marathon, and so some guy, when there was victory, had to run from Marathon to Athens, happened to be 26 miles, 42 point something or other, K's, whatever it is, to tell them of the victory. Guess where we get marathons from? Aristotle, 20 years he was in Plato's academy. He just liked to learn, I suppose. For 4 years, Philip of Macedon got him to teach his kid. His kid's name was Alexander the Great. So after he left Plato's school, he went to a place called Lyceum and set up his own academy. That word was just to remind you, that's a Greek word that says peripatepo, which means to walk around. In Aristotle's school, you walked around, that's how you learned. You paired up with another person and you just walked and talked. Years ago I studied at a Columban seminary and they used to do the same thing. You'd come up for class and you'd find yourself paired with somebody and just walk around the grounds. It was good fun. Unless you're as unfit as me. So Aristotle is really much more majestic in a sense. His interest is way wider. He starts examining the nature of animals and nature, and he wrote the first book on logic. It's still, Western logic's pretty much still Aristotle. So he's a pretty influential guy and wrote like you wouldn't believe. The complete works of Aristotle is a couple of volumes about that thick. It's just a lot of stuff. His influence through Aquinas, when we get there this week, is just unbelievable. So, I need to cough, sorry. I have this lung disease, I have to cough, sorry. I have this lung disease called bronchiectasis. It's good for my doctor's prayer life. But she puts this stethoscope over and goes, oh God, God. Remember what we said about the idea and the phenomenon? Still with this program? Aristotle changes that and says the idea is in the phenomenon. So for Plato, the idea was up there somewhere, and all of reality somehow or another aspired to share in the idea, in the form. But for Aristotle, the idea is in the form, and he calls the idea the essence. The essence of the thing is what makes the thing the thing. So there's essence and matter. Matter is just stuff. It's the essence or the form that makes the thing what it is. If we have an animal with 4 legs and another and a face and horns there, and it's brown, and we have another one here and another one here and another one here, different colours, and all these animals look quite different, but there's, we give these animals a name cow, and and we found a way to name these diverse things. And so the essence of this thing is, it's a cow. Brown is an accident. So in philosophy, I use these terms a lot, and my editor just goes around and scratches them out. I say something's an accident, and she thinks called triple O. For Aristotle, there's the essence and the accidents. So the essence is a man. An accident would be bald, brown hair, whatever, whatever. But the essence is in the thing. So that's a fairly significant move. It's the old philosophical problem called the one and the many. But let's just move on. So Aristotle talks about what makes a thing, and he talks about causes. So there's a material cause, an efficient cause, a formal cause, and a final cause. Am I hitting boring stage yet? No. Okay. So a material cause is what's the material that makes this thing what it is? The material cause of this is plastic. It's plastic that causes this to be what it is. The efficient cause is whoever made it. The formal cause is what is it? It's a chair. The final cause is what's it for, what's its purpose? To sit on. Now, everything can be explained in that way. When Aquinas eventually Christianises all of this, he also talks about the first cause. Just to be Christian, that talks about what are the prior arrangements that make all these causes possible. When I was in New Guinea, I was at a little church that had a project that had developed water pumps where people were drinking out of swamps. We developed this water pump that was just PVC pipe that had no moving parts, or had one moving part, which is a marble in a valve. Otherwise, no machinery, nothing. It was just put in this PVC pipe and you pull it up and down and water out of the water table come down. Now, at one stage, when we were closer to civilization, there was some concrete around, cement. And so we made, in this one town, this one village, we made a concrete slab just to be fancy. And so my team, who wouldn't graffiti and wet cement when you're in New Guinea? And so when I was in New Guinea, somebody said, I'll give you $10 if you can chuck a rock across the river. I said, you're on. And it cost me $10, there was no rocks. It's just mud. Anyway, so here's this cement thing, and these people my people are writing in cement, this pump was made by Reverend Graham and Bruce and da 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 da. And on the other side, the New Guineans wrote, a gift from God. That's a radically different way of understanding cause. These guys had first cause, and we had efficient cause. We did it. It's very interesting. I've got a photo of it, and I blew a bit of photo up on it. It's good fun. Okay, so that's still useful distinctions, because we talk about what causes what. Well, bear this in mind. So for Aristotle, the soul is divided into three. He differs a bit from his teacher. So reason is the highest part of a human being. In fact, for Aristotle, it's reason that makes you a human being. What makes a human being different from animals? Reason. Ability to reason. Then there's the animal part, which is the sensation, pleasure, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the soul part, which is like plants, like nutrition, that kind of thing. He talks about virtue. Virtue is a big deal for Aristotle. You understand virtue is right behaviour. Aristotle wrote a thing called the Nicomachean Ethics. his father's name was Nicomacheus. It's still interesting, kind of. No, I'm telling you lies, it's not. It's heavy going. Oh, it's interesting, but Aristotle's very dry. So, because he life's found in the reason, so it's just reason. That's all it is. But for him, virtue is right behaviour habituated. It's something in our day that we have lost. Our culture has lost it. Right behaviour, for Aristotle, is to behave as a good man would do, or woman, but behave as a good person would do. That's right behaviour. See? A virtue is only a virtue when you don't have to think about doing it anymore. So you've done the right behaviour so often that you don't have to think about it, it just comes, now you're a virtuous person. So can you see how that, when it gets to education and that kind of thing, that we used to live in a world where you just taught right habits. And I know how that became a nightmare, but I think we've kind of lost something as well. So for Aristotle, the way to raise a child was to force right habit and to teach it and teach it and teach it and teach it, so it didn't have to be taught anymore, it just came. It's not what we do anymore, of course. Now it's all within. Yeah. Oh, I can't wait till we get to Buber in the last 2 weeks. So for Aristotle, virtue is always the middle point between two extremes. So in the matter of courage, courage is the middle point between don't give a shit and scared to death. And all virtues are the mean point between two extremes. So it's learning to find that midpoint, which is what virtue is about. Reason, which emerges from what emerges from classical philosophy is reason is the highest human faculty. Reason in Greek is a word we know. It's logos, which is word. It's word in English. That word is word. In English, it loses a lot, actually. In Greek, the logos is the organising principle that makes sense of stuff. That's what the word means. And so we have that on the end of a lot of our words. Geology and all the ologies mean a study that pulls together all these things and makes sense. So that's what a word is. In Hebrew, it's interesting as well, different kind of tradition, but in Hebrew, a word, davar, spelled that way, davar, means thing. It's translated word, but it's the word you use for word, and it's the word you use for thing. Like, if you get hit by a thing, it's the same as getting hit by a word. So in the Hebrew tradition, words had real substance. And to be hit by a word was the same as being hit by a bat. Because that's their tradition. In the Greek tradition, and the reason I say this is because this all merges eventually. In the Greek tradition, word means the organising principle that pulls together lots of things into us in a way that can be made a study of or be made sense, and that's what word means. In our day, word means an expression of feeling. Which is why if you say, you know, if a Gen X says to you, I'll see you next week at 3 o'clock, Thursday for sure, next week at 3 o'clock, what that means is that's how I feel right now. It doesn't say anything about Thursday next week at 3 o'clock. There's nothing to do with that. It's just, that's how I feel. So the meaning of the word has shifted as our history has shifted and as our philosophy has shifted. I think my dad used the word as in this kind of Hebrew tradition. If you got hit by his words, you knew you'd been hit. That's about it. We've got about 10 minutes for a question. You can, if you get a really nutty question, you can text it to that number, and if it's really dull, I'll forget the text code. And if it's really good, next week we can kind of pick it up and run with it, because it might be, you know, useful for others as well. Anybody got a question?
The idea of the soul and the body being separated. I think I'm talking about the Plato idea. Sorry, I'm trying to write it down.
Yeah.
So the soul and the body being separated, and I think you said something about that's an idea that you build on later on. But I just wondered, did Plato regard the soul as being? I was kind of wondering about the link between that and the Buddhist idea of ego and stuff. And does Plato regard the soul as being something bigger than you, or is it an individualized? It's like my little ego, my little soul and my little body, or is it my body and then the greater thing that I'm part of?
Yeah. All of these characters up until up here, all of these thinkers before here always have a God somewhere. And so for Plato, not only was your soul a participation in the divine, so was everything that had form, because it was all reaching for the divine. It was all reaching for something that was bigger and greater. So to know yourself was, in a sense, in our day, to know yourself means to look in. But for him, to know yourself was to know your connected self, which is something which is mostly missing. I hear people all the time quote Plato because you can twist it and give him a modern meaning, and the modern meaning is always, it's all found within, the wisdom is within, and it's not what Plato means.
We're in the ancient Greek world, the concept of love originate and how it's refined. It must have been, could be found or in the soul and in reasons and stuff. If they had a word for love or like and stuff.
Yeah. There's actually there's half a dozen different Greek words for love, and I've heard a whole bunch of sermons that make big things out of these different words, but I suspect that it's more kind of interchangeable. I think the right answer to that is that the concept of love has sort of changed. It's kind of evolved a bit. I think if we could interview Aristotle, he would talk about love of beauty as being, he would talk in the same way that he divided the soul. So there would be intellectual love, which would be higher than bodily love. Yeah. Plato would say that. Augustine said that. So you can see how, if you want to be ordained a priest, it would be higher for you not to be married. Which was only, everything that I ever say is much more complicated than what I actually say. Yeah. Because there's all, the real world is actually quite muddy and quite mixed up. The Constantinople Catholic tradition, that's the Greek tradition, still insists today that a priest has to be married. But if you're not, but you can't become a bishop. if you are married. But if you're going to be a priest of a normal church, you have to be married, and that's always been. And the idea is you're less likely to sleep with somebody else's wife if you got one of your own. But in the Roman Church, it was more Platonic. We still say I have a Platonic relationship, which means ideas, not body. That's what that means. So the idea with Plato, this bodily thing was lesser. Interestingly enough, the last pope, the first encyclical he wrote, this is not going to sound very dramatic to you, but in the terms of church history, this is unbelievable. In his first encyclical, he said, when a man and woman make love, they participate in the nature of God. Now, all of the other popes just rolled in their graves because he said in this bodily activity, you do participate in the divine. But for all of church history, this bodily thing was lower than reason. It was all about intellect.
A question. All of these names that you have are men?
Yes.
So my question is, where are the women? And the other question, I'm hearing through that the women are not considered part of a functioning society. There's some, they're lesser, there's some underlying, they're not up with us.
That's right.
So
actually, it's funny. It's not quite as clear as it sounds, but it is generally true to say that women were the possession of a man. In the same way that you possessed a house or a horse or anything else, you possessed a woman, and that, you know, in weddings we used to say, who gives this woman to be married to this man? What that means is, from the ownership of which man to which man is this woman passing? That's what that's about. Luckily, I don't say that anymore. I do the quickest weddings in the West. But that's where it comes from. So, women were of not very high status at all back here. In fact, for the ancients, the ancient Greeks, the love between, and I mean bodily love, between a man and a boy was considered higher than between a man and a woman. But women were essential things because that's how you propagated the race and so on. This did change a bit, but nothing to get excited about. Look, what is interesting in a way is all through this period, we have the age of monasteries, and where there were orders of nuns, they were run by women who were the most powerful figures you could ever possibly believe. So there is a tradition of powerful women, but certainly not until way up here are we starting to talk about women as being equal with men. You know, we talk about democracy back here, but slaves were not liberated. You know, so we didn't legislate against slavery. I think in Spain it was about 1880, they were the first. No, before that. In America, 1865. You know, it's not that long ago. So, look,